familiarity that is talking about something that is completely cosmically profound. That in the beginning, Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit abided as one God, preceding all that ever was, all that ever is. And then something incredible happened. God became human. The Word became flesh. This text is one that provides us a problem and a solution. It speaks to a problem about the omni nature of God, the God who is the God of all-knowing, all-presence, being everywhere and all power, God who is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. That understanding of God is the fundamental way in which we know that God is God. God is greater than anything we can imagine. Therefore, God would contain omnipotence, omnipresence, and omniscience, all knowledge, all power, all presence everywhere. But if you've lived any length of time, you know that that God and that understanding of God can fall far short. If God is everywhere, where was God when my brother died? If God is everywhere, how could that have happened to me? I'm here, I don't feel God. I don't feel God's presence at all. If God has all power, why didn't God stop that horrible tsunami that happened that we remember 20 years ago? God could have done that. Nobody would have even noticed. It wouldn't have broken any rules. God could have just prevented it. God's supposed to be so powerful. God is supposed to be around and make a world that should be better than this. If God is so wise and knows everything, couldn't God have created a better world where people wouldn't suffer, where we wouldn't be where we're at today? Those are questions that are real, and you've probably had some version of them at some point in your life. You might be sitting with one right now. God, who is so great, the Omni God, is insufficient. How do I deal with it? One time I went to the Omni Hotel. Anybody been to an Omni Hotel? Well, I was a little disappointed by the Omni. I don't know if anybody else was, but when you check in, you know, you go in your room and there's this refrigerator and you open it up and there's all this stuff. It's not free. It's not Omni. It's not all is free, all is included. And in fact, there's a resort fee and there's a parking fee. And the towels are super, super thick, but they're so thick you can't really fit them in your suitcase. It's a problem, these Omni things. It's a problem. Go for the washcloths. Good idea. So what I'm saying is there's a chasm. There's a chasm between the ideal that we hold of God, all loving, all knowing, full of grace, and then our reality. And so God gave us a solution. An amazing, laughable, absurd solution. Only God could think this, in my personal opinion. And that is, God became human. God bridged the chasm to be among us, to be among the creatures whom he loves so much, so whom he holds beloved. So the Word becomes a baby. And with that process, we have a counterpoint across the chasm. All-knowing, knowing nothing. Born with no capacity to do anything more than any of us were born with. I mean, now you can watch Instagram and you see these babies that look like they came out of the womb talking. I think that that's AI. I'm still checking it out. But you see what I mean? Babies are profoundly ignorant. In fact, they have proven that dogs are smarter than babies, right? We know this. Like, we have to grow. We have to grow. God chose to experience no knowledge. Powerless, you want to talk about a difference across the chasm, across from omnipotent to a baby to a human. So limited. We are so fragile. We are so physical. Infinite God becomes embodied in flesh. So God becomes physical and finite and fragile, just like us. Think about this. He's born. Joseph sends out a birth announcement. Jesus, 6 pounds, 20 ounces, mother and son are both stable. This is the God that we know. Okay, that was pretty bad, sorry. Okay, but you see the point, right? We're moving across this profound spectrum of God's presence among us. And then there's us. Then there's our invitation. Because we're the ones standing in the chasm saying, where are you, God, in my suffering? Where are you that you have made a world like this when you could have made a different one? How am I going to love you? How am I going to sense you? And God, in God's great kindness and mercy, sends us a book with all the stories of this man who was born and lived and died inside skin, inside particularity, with words that he had to learn. His first word, probably dada, just like many of us. And becoming more and more himself in the fullness of who he was, both God and divine, manifesting for us a way to look into the face of God for the first time and forever. That's the gift that we celebrate today. And we can bring who we are into that space. That's the choice we make. That we will bridge that gap by our choice to let those two identities of both the particularity of Jesus and the wonder of God in God's fullness through Jesus in our lives. Do you remember that song? There's so many different Christmas songs, but there's one that is a friend of mine's very favorite. Jesus and Mary are sleeping in the hay, and this kid comes in, and he decides, well, they're asleep and it's quiet, but I think what they really need is a drum solo. Whatever you think you can bring it. But bring yourself into this relationship, because this is the beginning of the story, but the story through and through is the story that invites you to fullness of life. The wholeness of Jesus is a model for us of our personal wholeness. It's not going to look the same. Mine isn't the same as yours, is the same as yours. But that process of growing into the Godhead is our invitation. And someday we will see the fullness of it. And someday we will enter into the joy of it. And it will be greater than any Omni hotel, any resort, all of us together in the fullness of joy. Taste and see it now. Don't stand in the chasm without bridging that gap, because God has already done it for you. All you have to do is step in.